Welcome back to the She Might podcast, your go-to destination for all things unexpected motherhood. I'm your host, Erin Galloway, CEO of She Might, and today I'm excited to welcome Darien Williams and Melanie Wolff to the podcast. Darien Williams is a co-founder and co-CEO of Brella, an innovative childcare company founded in 2019 that combines high-quality early education with flexible scheduling for modern families. Drawing on more than 15 years of experience in architecture, real estate, and construction, Williams has helped redefine the physical and operational model for child care centers. Before founding Brella, Williams worked at leading architecture firms including OMA New York under Rem Koolhaas and Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, and was a partner at Naba Williams. She's a licensed architect in California and New York and holds a Bachelor of Arts in Urban Studies and Architectural History from Brown University and a Master of Architecture from the Southern California Institute of Architecture. At Brella, Williams oversees the company's early learning vision, childcare operations, and real estate development strategy. Her expertise has been instrumental in creating thoughtfully designed environments that support child development while overcoming many of the real estate and operational challenges that have historically limited access to high-quality childcare. Williams and her co-founder, Melanie Wolff, created Brella after recognizing the need for a more flexible, family-centered approach to childcare. She lives in Los Angeles and is a mother of 2 children. Melanie Wolff is the co-founder and co-CEO of Brella. With a background in marketing, technology, and consumer innovation, Wolff has helped shape Brella's customer-focused approach and technology-enabled operating model. Before founding Brella, Wolff spent more than 15 years building brands and digital experiences for companies including Amazon, Johnson & Johnson, Schick, and Bravo. Throughout her career, she's led innovative marketing and technology initiatives, including the development of one of the first iPad applications and one of the earliest television integrations with Twitter. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Art History from Princeton University and an MBA from Columbia Business School. At Brella, Wolff oversees marketing, enrollment, finance, technology, partnerships, and business development. Her focus on customer experience and innovation has helped establish Brella as a leader in modern childcare, leveraging technology and data to create a more seamless experience for families while supporting the company's growth. Melanie lives in Santa Monica with her family and is a mother of 3 children. Today, we're talking about all things childcare with our friends at Brella, hearing the story behind the company, learning how they're doing things differently, and exploring what the future of childcare could look like for families. So, Darien and Melanie, thanks so much for joining us on the She Might podcast. So let's dive right in. Can you tell me about your own motherhood journey? How has it shaped the way you think about childcare and supporting families? Melanie, let's go ahead and start with you.
Sure. I guess my journey is still ongoing. I have 3 children. They're 12, 10, and 8. And I have a supportive partner who really is truly a partner. And I'm really grateful for that because, I know how hard it is in general, but to be able to do it on your own is even harder. My story and how I came to this really came from, I think, an event that caused me to really have a professional breakdown. So I had a career in marketing and advertising. I wanted to be a chief marketing officer. I was, working for big companies like Amazon and Schick and really excited to build that career. My husband and I decided to move across the country from New York to Los Angeles. And when we did that, we broke down our safety net, not really knowing what that meant until one day at work, I got a call that I needed to pick up my son at a local TJ Maxx because his nanny had taken him there and was arrested for shoplifting. So I ran down there, pretty hysterical, picked him up, and came home that night. My husband and I were immediately looking for childcare near us. And we went on Google and we did the search and couldn't find anything. And as a result, I needed to take a step back from my career because we really couldn't enroll him in anything quickly. And I think that experience where you really realize you need so much more to be able to support a child than just what 1 or 2 people can provide. And that the system is not built for that. And the system is not built as a safety net, and it's not built as infrastructure for families. And most families are actually in that really fragile situation where one breakdown, mine was extreme, but it could be anything, can cause you a huge ripple effect, not just on your personal life, but also on your professional life.
Yeah, that's so true. I think there are so many moments, I think especially in early motherhood, where you just have those moments of like, oh my gosh, like what is the support system around me? And I can think of like countless, moments for me. And I have a almost 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, we've got this under control. We have like the systems built to support us in our village. And then those things come up. And I think that that's when people really see, oh, like, do I actually have the support system that I have to really support my motherhood journey and my parenthood journey? So Darien, what about you? Tell me a little bit about your motherhood journey. How did this shape the way you think of childcare and supporting families?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to Melanie, actually, when my kids were born, we lived across the country from our support system, which is, I think, another really common situation for parents today, meaning we didn't have extended family. We were living in New York at the time. Everybody was in California. And I also had a moment where my needs came to a head and resulted in a setback in my career as well. I was working as an architect. I was pursuing my licensure in the state of New York. And as part of that process, you take these 7-hour-long exams proctored on a Saturday. And I had scheduled a babysitter through care.com for my 2-year-old who never showed up. And as a result, if you don't show to one of these tests or you fail, you have to wait 6 months to take it again. So in the course of one day, my timeline towards licensure was pushed out 6 months, which was really disappointing. And it, at that moment, felt really hard to believe that in a city like New York, where so many services are on demand and immediately accessible and at your fingertips, there was really nowhere to turn. I had about an hour where I could have come up with a plan B, but there wasn't one available, which was incredibly disappointing, but also this light bulb moment of this needs to be built. Families need to have a place that they can turn to. I also saw an opportunity in my professional work. So I was working on large scale mixed use developments like Hudson Yards in Manhattan and was seeing a lot of service-based industries being reinvented. This was in the mid-2010s. So tech-enabled fitness, dentistry, healthcare popping up where people could access these types of services on demand and in a much more fluid way on their terms. And coupling my personal setback experience with seeing this shifting landscape in our city, it felt like a really opportune moment.
So Melanie, you have a background in marketing, and Darien, you have a background in architecture. So tell me, what led you to create Brella? Like, how did you guys come together to create that?
Yeah, I think you'll notice the one background we don't have is in early education. But I actually think that it is the secret sauce. Childcare is an industry that hasn't had any meaningful innovation in over 50 years, despite all of the social changes that have happened in the world. And it really is a legacy system built for a legacy time. And we came to this as parents first, and parents who were just being failed by the system. And I think at our wits' end, and the number of people that we meet who said, I had this idea, I've thought about building this and starting this, it's such a common problem. But, we do have really valuable elements of our careers that we're bringing in. From my perspective, a lot of my career was built around customer experience. And in childcare specifically, the end customer is the child, but the parents are often forgotten. And I think that there's just a real lack of understanding of what it takes to get your child into that building every day for drop off. Mm-hmm. And whether it's you're running late and then the school punishes you for that, or you forgot the lunch and you have to go back home and there isn't another choice. The system is not built to acknowledge how hard it is to be a parent today and the level of support that they need. So, bringing that mindset that you see in other brands and other sort of hospitality experiences into childcare was a real passion of mine and something I wanted to build. Darien, I'll let you talk about the architecture side.
Sure. I think that design is actually an area that both Melanie and I are really passionate about and played a role in our prior careers. For me, coming from architecture, I was always attuned to the environment where I was dropping my children off and what it felt like to walk through those doors. And as a parent, when you walk into a space that maybe isn't clean or hasn't been maintained or just doesn't feel right from a layout perspective, it impacts you. It impacts you on a physiological level, an emotional level. And I think one of the things that's been so interesting to explore in Brella is the role of design, both in the child experience and how to create an optimal environment for them to learn and develop, but also the role that it plays in establishing trust with families. We had this vision that we wanted families to walk into our doors and have a moment of exhale that you have when you walk into a really welcoming space. So in a lot of ways, there are a lot of direct applications, I think, for both of us that have really helped distinguish our brand.
Yeah, I love the innovation. I think that's what struck me the most when I was initially talking to Andy on your team and just hearing that you guys are doing things differently, but there's just such an important aspect of the brand and the experience that not a lot of other people consider, especially when you're even just thinking marketing as a whole. It's like, oh, how do we get people in the door? But I think you're thinking the full customer experience, not just the children, but the parents. And I love the idea of like, they have that moment where they're walking in and they feel like this is a safe place for my kids. I feel good about having my kids here. And I think that's so important because, you know, we talk to a lot of moms and they're just so afraid. They're afraid of childcare. They've heard all the horror stories because you mostly hear the really bad stories and you don't hear the really good stories. And so creating a safe space where you feel good about it and you feel like, okay, I trust the people that are here. You know, if I can't currently be with my kids right now, I want them to be in the best place possible. And so I think that's a unique thing that Brella brings. Can you share a little bit more about what's different about Brella and how you approached that when you were creating this space?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that you just said there that really was at the foundation of why we built Brella the way we did. You know, we started from a place of wanting to build a system that was more flexible and responsive. And what we saw from our own experiences, and then we actually talked to a lot of parents in the beginning of our journey, was that most families wanted childcare that could just fit their schedules instead of having their schedules fit some sort of childcare day that was being prescribed to them by whatever center they could get their child into. And that was an easy fix because you can do that with a workout class and you can do that with your dental appointment or your hair appointment. So we basically brought what we saw out in the world into childcare. So families can go onto our app and they can choose which center they want to use. So some families will use multiple centers in a week and they can choose the hours and then the days that they want to book and they pay just for what they book. So there's maximum flexibility and honestly, I think it's more maximum control. So families are not paying for what they don't need. They're not booking what they don't need. They get exactly what they need at any time. That network too is really important. And I think that's really innovative. This idea that, you know, you could use whatever Brella is closer to wherever you're going to be on that day. Right now, that only exists in LA. But, you know, our vision is that as a working mom, most of the time you have to leave your child at home. But why don't we design a system where you bring your child with you and there is care built in where you go, care that you trust, care that is familiar to your child. And that way you get to be with your child, especially in those formative years where it is really important to be with them. So we wanted to build a system like that. And then I guess the last really kind of big piece that maybe isn't a differentiator, but was I have to have, like we would not open this without it, was quality. And what we found was that the flexible options that were available to us, think the care.com babysitter that Darien was using, there's typically a lower quality. And there's this acceptance for, you know, our society that it's okay to leave your child with somebody that you don't know and just lock them in your house and hope that they keep them alive. But I don't think our system should be built that way. And families should feel really good about the care that they leave their children with. And, you know, they should know that their children are being loved and they're having a developmental experience and that it isn't a sacrifice to do that. So, you know, we've built a beautiful curriculum. Our educators are world class. And we're able to do all of that while still maintain that flexibility for a family.
I think that is just really important. I think I shared with your other member of your team that I feel really grateful for the childcare that I found. And I think I have a very unique situation that a lot of people experience. I feel like the people that are at our childcare center are very much family to us now. You know, my son is moving on to kinder prep this year, and I'm very sad about it because I'm sad for him to transition to that. I'm excited for him. Like, he's turning 5 and he's going into that. And my daughter will stay at that school, but they feel like family to us. And we tell people to build their villages. It's not always going to be like your friends and your family that are your village. Like, I very much rely on the people at this daycare as my village. And I think it's not just they give to me by caring for my kids. I think there has been a mutual support and relationship built through that. And I think that's something very unique that I have. And I think part of that has been because of the flexibility that they've been able to offer in a kind of different way, just because of the unique opportunity I have there. And so I think flexibility is so key. I think when people are wondering, like, how am I going to do work and how am I going to make sure that childcare is good for my kids and balance all of that and figure out what it looks like to take a sick day when kids are sick, or something happens at the daycare and you inevitably get that phone call to pick your kids up. It's like, how do we build those systems that work? And so I think that the way that you guys are building that, it works because you're only paying for what you use, which is a huge pain point, I think, for a lot of people who really struggle when you're like, okay, my kid's not even at school. They've been out this whole week because they've been sick. So I'm still having to figure out when to work, but also I'm paying for them to be in care when they're not even there. And I understand why that system was built that way. But you're so right that the world is changing. And I think the systems that are involved in parenthood have to change with it. And I think that's what I really love about Brella, is that you guys are like, no, we can think of this in a different way. A system that hasn't changed much, we can shift this and actually make it work for working parents. And we love that. And I think we love the idea of institutional change. We're really focused on that. How do we do a lot of upstream things that are going to support families and make motherhood more supported in our country and parenthood more supported? And I think that's what Brella wants to do, is kind of bring that childcare support to where families are already at. So I think that's just an important aspect of what you all are doing. So since launching Brella, what have families taught you about what they really need besides? Are there any other things that stand out to you, Darien?
Yeah, I think when we started Brella, we had a more holistic vision of being really a support system. So taking what felt like a pain point and a very narrow service in a way, to expanding that to provide this broader support system for families that would include things like parent education, like a deeper sense of customer service that comes through in the flexibility and in the way that we serve families on a day-to-day basis, the way we show up for them. I think that, one of the things we've learned from families and that we've all experienced is that there's so much noise in the media about how you should be doing things, the way you should be feeding your baby, what sleep should look like at home. And it can be really hard to filter through that. And your school and your care, your early education source can become a trusted voice amidst all that noise. We offer dedicated workshops to families on some of these key topics that come up. Like I said, anything from toilet training to nutrition to the experience of playing with your child. A lot of parents go into this not even knowing how to interact with their child at different stages in a way that is actually supporting their development and their growing bonds. So giving them those resources, I think, has been a really wonderful layer of our service to families. We are continuing to learn because parenting in our society also continues to evolve. And I think that's been something that's really helped us ride the waves of launching our business at the beginning of COVID, and is being adaptable. And so we never see Brella as reaching this static state, and that's just the way it is moving forward. We're constantly surveying our customers, inviting them into the conversation so that we can understand what they need, because ultimately a big part of our vision is to create care that's modeled after their needs.
Yeah, I love the client-driven model, or the person-centered model. I think that's super important, especially when you're serving parents who have a million things going on. So being able to serve them well in the space that they're already in is so important because it's so accessible for people. It's not like you have to go to 10 different places for the support you need. You're less likely to go and get that support, whether that's parenting support or whatever that looks like through a workshop elsewhere. But if they're offering it within your childcare system that you're already showing up there twice a day. So I think that's so important, and that's just makes things more accessible. And that's the pain point that we hear from people who are walking the different unexpected things of motherhood, is that they don't even know where to start when it comes to childcare. They don't know how to find childcare. They feel like there's just constant lists in the area. They're just not accessible. My sister lives in a more rural area in Arizona and runs a nonprofit that supports moms. And there are lists that last like 6 months. They're wait lists. And so it's like you're trying to help people care for their kids while also like having to work, and it's just not available. And so I think we all know like policy is great and advocating for, better supports for families is wonderful. But I think when you see businesses who are stepping in and modeling like this is how you should support families, I think that goes a huge way. When we talk about like institutional change, how can you, as you've launched Brella and seen how really childcare, the lack of childcare, lack of support impacts families, how do you see employers and corporations playing a role in reimagining childcare for families?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. The first place is obviously the cost of care. And, the cost of care is a real challenge. And we face that as operators because, we understand that childcare is expensive and Brella is expensive. Like, we're aware of that. But on the flip side of that, it is because we have to pay our educators, and the educators, they're earning minimum wage, and yet they often have master's, bachelor's degrees. They're a highly skilled workforce. So there's a lot of tension within the industry that can't purely be solved with the operator and the parents alone. So we need some additional support to come in. And I think that there's two potential options. One is the government, and then one are employers. I think you see really amazing success stories with employers really investing. Sometimes they're building out centers for their workforce. Sometimes they're just subsidizing care. But I do think that there's so much evidence that leads to a happier workforce, a more successful and productive workforce, and retaining the valuable employees that you have. So, the belief for that is there. I think one of the things that's really missing in my mind is sort of the alignment between government and employers on, well, what are we doing to incentivize an employer beyond just these sort of more like subjective measures? Tax credits for employers that offer childcare are really low. I mean, you've probably seen this, but you actually get more credit on or tax credits if you have a company jet than if you offer childcare to your employees. Like, how broken is that? That is insane. But, the system is just not built to perceive childcare as a valuable investment for companies to make. So building more alignment where companies feel like they can justify that value is really important. So, I think that we do need another leg in the stool to make it work for families and to increase supply. And where that comes from, it probably needs to be both from a government and an employer-driven sort of, movement as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think now that we've stepped into the world of working with businesses, just the data doesn't lie when it comes to how this impacts employee retention, how it gives you a competitive edge when you're hiring, how it just increases employee satisfaction when they feel supported when they're working parents. So, Darien, what's something that you wish that business leaders understood about the relationship between childcare, working parents, and a healthy workforce?
Yeah, I think that, as you're saying, that the data is there, that childcare is one of the key components to make a workforce sustainable, to make communities sustainable. economically and socially. And so whether or not an employer is choosing to provide on-site care or subsidize near-site care, the awareness of that and the willingness to connect their team with resources to locate near amenities or to advocate for childcare with their landlords if they're a tenant in a building can go a long way in helping to revalue this use within our cities and our rural communities. We all know that childcare is incredibly valuable because when you become a parent, suddenly you're deciding where to live based on where care and education are available. It's this driver in the trajectory of your life. But I think more broadly, there's still a stigma against this use as a nuisance somehow, or something that you want to tuck away into the church basement or the edge of the city, the kind of forgotten leftover space. Whereas it's beautiful. Everybody in reality wants to be around children and families. And once you experience it, you know that, but this should be at the heart of our communities. We should be celebrating it physically in our built environments and making it convenient for those employers and their teams so that everybody can thrive. I mean, this is a zero-sum game. So I think it goes back to that broad revaluing of this industry and the role it plays.
Yeah, I think everybody has such a different perspective on childcare and who's using it, why we're using it. And I think, like I've said, like the world has shifted, right? More women are in the workforce. And I think it's the trajectory of that. It's like currently about 30% of the leadership roles in corporate America are filled by women. That's going to be up to 50% in the next 10 years. So it's not changing. And, you know, when families aren't supported for like within that first year, especially with parental leave and reentry, if moms don't feel like their work is going to work for them when it comes to this transition, 40% of them are leaving their jobs, and they're not leaving to go stay at home. They're leaving to go somewhere else or to start something new. And so I think we have to adapt, right? We have to be able to adapt and support families as families are more and more raising their children away from other family members and don't have that support system that was there 20 years ago. And so those are some of the realities I think that so many families are facing. And so I think you both are so right that building something that works for parents now is, I think, incredibly important. So you both have been in this childcare world for, I think, a little over 6 years now. Is that correct? So if you could change one thing about how we think about childcare in this country, I think you shared a little bit already, Darien, just in like how we view families and how we incorporate them in, what would it be?
I mean, you know, I think it isn't, well, wow, sorry, I'm bumbling the answer here, but
It's okay.
There's so many different ways to go. I mean, I think having come into this industry, not knowing a lot about it, I think that we have sort of seen it from so many different perspectives. I will say that one of the things that I would love to change is that it really should be respected at the same level as other educational institutions are. So there's this little like joke in the industry, you know, are you daycare or are you preschool? There's no actual difference, but there's this sort of assumed difference that like a lot of childcare is just like not really educational. But the reality is pretty much all of early care and education is foundational and extremely important for brain development and for really the development of the human. And we don't look at it the same way that we look at elementary ed or higher education. And I think that that's a problem in our country. And it's made it so that it isn't valued. The workforce isn't valued. Also, sort of the necessity of it isn't valued. And I think if we were to change it and really understand, like many countries, I mean, Scandinavian countries perceive it that way. And early education workers are making the same amount as college professors. And you see such improvements in the children's development, in their abilities to succeed. And, you know, there really is the preschool to prison pipeline. Like it exists. And it's in part because we don't really value this important foundational moment and we're not investing in it. And we're not, I think, respecting the people that are really doing it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I know I've said this, but I love the people at our daycare, and I have seen how they've impacted our lives and cared for our kids more than just showing up every day and being there. It's like they've actually impacted them developmentally, and they've taught them so much. And so I think you're so right. The value of the people that are working in the industry needs to change, and it needs to grow. And I think that'll hugely change how people view childcare in our country and how people are treated and the investment that's made in childcare. And that will only increase the availability of it and the quality of it. And so then you're going to be hearing less of those horror stories and more of like how it's positively impacting families and children and allowing them to thrive versus just trying to survive. So Darien, what are your thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I think that maybe just double clicking into that, I think it's revaluing the educator specifically. That was one of the stakeholder groups when we started that we've gone on a journey to understand. And a lot of our work is actually on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we're caring for the caregiver, that they feel supported and invested in and know that they matter and their impact matters. I think there, on one hand, is in academic communities a really strong understanding of the impacts of 0 to 5, and we all talk about it on a high level, but we don't treat the people that are in this workforce in a way that they deserve as professionals. So helping to shift that paradigm, I think, is a big goal and hope of ours. Yeah, and I would say, I think the other thing, the other sort of wish I would have is to see, and I don't know if this is directly answering your question, but I think shifting the dialogue a little bit from childcare as a crisis story. You know, childcare has been in the headlines a lot in the last decade or 5 years. It's been a political platform for a lot of different candidates. And I think we're at a moment where it would be really great to see the storyline shifting from the problem to a burgeoning of solutions and innovation. Mm-hmm. And that's going to require investment from capital partners, from the government, from employers, but let's start building. We would love to see more innovative models out there. And there are some. There are programs popping up. There's the free childcare program in the Bay Area. There are interesting things starting to happen, and just putting more of our attention on that and seeing childcare as an area in which we can create something special as a society.
Yeah, I think you're so right that it's like seen as the crisis point. It's seen as we just have to, like, childcare, it's there. We have to figure it out. Like, we have to find it and just place your kids there. And then eventually they'll be in elementary school or whatever that looks like. But I think you're right. Like, I think like shifting the mindset to like, this is really good for kids. Like we can build the system that's innovative and supports families in the way that they need. And is also able to support the people who are working there and the people who care, these educators who deeply care for these children. I think shifting to a more positive view of it would definitely, encourage some of those changes. So tell me a little bit about where Brella is at now. So tell me how many centers you have. What are your hopes for the next 10 years?
We have 3 centers that are operating now in LA, and they're going great. They're full and busy, and we're really proud because they really are now almost the anchor of the community that they're in, which is something that we've always believed. We are working now on opening more Brellas in LA because we want to build this network. But our real vision is to have them be nationwide and, really to, I think, unlock care for families, at least a new vision of care for families. If you have to move or if you have to travel, you typically have to uproot your entire care system and rebuild that wherever you land. And that's really hard. It's time consuming. It's scary. What if we had a world where you moved and there was a Brella that was in your new neighborhood and you just plugged your child in there and you got going. And I think if we build systems like that understand how families live, the dynamism of families, and it can be from anything, it's a move, a divorce, whatever it is, things change. And we've built very static systems, very isolated and fragmented systems. So what if we build a network and one that families plug into and feel really supported? So that's our vision. And, I think we have a lot of proof that our model works, both economically, but also for the development of kids. And now we just want to build more.
Yeah. So tell me, if you had to give one nugget of advice to someone who is trying to figure out their childcare right now, what's just one thing you would say to them? It could be advice, it could be just an encouragement to them as they kind of explore that. Darien, we'll start with you.
I think one of the things we've learned in opening centers, and that any operator in this space will know, is that childcare really is a word of mouth marketing network. And I think that that's beautiful. I would encourage somebody starting on the journey of seeking care to talk to their neighbors, talk to their friends, talk to their employers. This is a highly relational transaction, and trust is so important. And so really, I think I'm going into it knowing what your values are, as far as what you're looking for in a childcare partner, and getting the advice of people in your network and your community. That is the first step. And, I think beyond that is it's looking for indicators of quality. So that ranges from what is their educational pedagogy, what is the environment, what are the qualifications of their teachers, and making sure that that lines up with what you're looking for and what you feel good about bringing to your child as a daily experience. I would start there.
That's great. I think always tying it back to values and what do you value as a family, and how do you want that to kind of filter into the other areas of your parenthood journey, right? Whether that's childcare, your life, your friends, that village that you're building. That's so important to be able to figure that out, I think, first. Melanie, what's one piece of advice or just kind of some insight that you would give to a mom looking for support?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is more just general, but I really think you can trust your instincts. And I think that is something that's probably harder to do with this bombardment of information and opinions. I mean, I feel like I'm not even that old, but I feel like when I started parenting, Instagram wasn't even a thing. And, there was a printed sheet that you would get from other moms that would kind of tell you the schedule of when do you introduce this size nipple and when do you introduce solids. But now there's just so much information and it's so overwhelming. And I think at the end of the day, what is right for you, your family, and your child. And the more you trust that, if you walk into a space and you're this is our space, it's your space. And if you walk into a space and you don't feel like it's your space, then it probably isn't. And, you really need to build that muscle, because as your children age and as you face even kind of more different challenges, having that trust that what you and your family needs is so important. So it's hard. That's definitely a hard one. And finding trusted people around you that you can go to for those moments is really key.
Yeah. I always tell people when they're searching for childcare, if you feel like something is off,
it's off.
It's probably off, at least for you. And that's that is okay.
Yeah.
That is valid to walk into a space and tour multiple daycares and be there's just something. There's something about it. And I had that experience too. I was I don't know what it is about this, but I can tell you, when I walked into the space that my kids are at, I knew something was different. And I was this is the right fit for us. And so we always encourage people. We have a child care interview checklist for if you're touring daycares or other resources. And we'll link your website and any other resources that you guys would feel are valuable in that journey. And I'm just appreciative of what you're doing. We're focused on really making motherhood more achievable, more supported in our country. And part of that is just making the early motherhood journey a little bit easier, especially in the first 5 years when everything feels very unknown and very uncertain. And I think when there are people who are building supports that really matter and make a difference in families' lives, I think that's just so important. And I think that's what you're doing at Brella. And so I love what you all are doing. And we are happy to try to connect anyone. We're national, so we'll try to connect anyone who's local to LA to you guys, but we're looking to see you grow, and we're excited to have you grow and come to Arizona. That's where we are. We'd love to have you here. But is there anything else that you'd like to share about Brella before we sign off?
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing us with your community, and we are excited and we'd love to come to Arizona. And I think we also encourage anybody who is facing a problem to not be afraid to maybe try to fix it. I think Darien and I never probably imagined that we would be in this career, but it's been so rewarding, and especially so because we both faced this problem and decided we didn't want others to face it. And so we're doing this, and the only people who can solve these problems are the people who are living it. So definitely shout out, if you're facing something now, you can fix it, even if it feels crazy.
Yeah, that's so true. I think when we see the impact within the parenthood journey, it's usually parents who've had a really bad experience with something who want to see it change. And so I think that's what's so encouraging about both of your stories, and hearing you share we both had these different experiences that just kind of drew us to a different world that we didn't expect when it came, when you first probably started your careers, you probably didn't expect to be here, but to see you thinking in an innovative way to make that journey easier based on some of your experiences, I think it's encouraging, and it's exciting to see moms who are really doing it to really make an impact on other moms in the country and dads. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate it. Remember, you don't have to navigate motherhood alone. At She Might, we're building a community for women facing the unexpected, offering support, connection, and encouragement every step of the way. The conversations you hear on this podcast are inspired by the incredible women whose journeys have brought them to She Might, from coaching clients and grant recipients to the members of our online and in-person communities. They help shape every episode. Thank you for being part of our village. If today's conversation resonated with you, we invite you to connect with us. You'll find links to our website, social media channels, and all of the resources mentioned in this episode in the show notes. That's all for now. Thanks for joining us on the She Might podcast, and we'll see you next time.